Mitski broke out onto the music scene, the indie music scene in 2016 with the album, oh, what's it called? American, no, wait a minute. Puberty 2, what am I talking about? You're a Best American Girl was what I was thinking of, because that was the single from the album, which was very good. And the overall album was actually pretty nice. I really liked the vibe that the album gave off. Unfortunately, it didn't really grab me in any kind of way. It just sort of left a nice feeling while the album was on, but once it was over, I didn't really feel like I wanted to return to it. But I appreciated it for what it was and thought Mitski had a really cool sound and thought that she would drop something really good in the future. And Be the Cowboy is somewhat of a step up in some ways, but in many others it also falters quite a bit and ends up being a slight step down too. I'm going to say that Mitski's gotten better at writing good tunes. I think she's really grasped how to make a really nice indie pop track, especially in songs like Nobody, and also the second track, especially the second track actually, Why Didn't You Stop Me, which has this really nice progression to it. It's got quite a dancey melody. I just love the way this track sounds. It's just so upbeat and so refreshing for her too. I do like how she's tried something that's a little bit different for her and it's ended up succeeding quite well. It also reminds me of like an artist like Angel Olsen, who also started her career off in this sort of reverb heavy type sound and then broke away and started writing more tangible type songs with better written hooks, better choruses and stuff like that, and Mitski's sort of done that too as time's gone on with her career. And similarly on this album, Be the Cowboy, Mitski goes into some very personal details. Mitski certainly digs deep with her emotions, which doesn't really work out for me all the time on this album. It can be pretty weak lyrically to me. I try and step away from it and look at it from her perspective and see that maybe things haven't quite gone so well in her life. She might have gone through some traumatic things, but that doesn't always make for interesting lyricism. I mean, I'm pretty sure anyone can admit that. It can actually make albums weaker sometimes, especially if you're just throwing all your emotions at something without really looking at it and thinking how I can polish this, how I can tidy it up. Because there are some moments on here that are completely melodramatic. Like, I just can't follow the sort of narrative that she's going through on this album at times, because some lyrics just sound very much written by like a teen. Nobody being one of the best examples of this here, which I said was one of the better tracks because of the tune and the melody that it produces. I really like the way the track sounds, but lyrically it just falls completely short. Nobody will save me, I just need someone to kiss. Nobody, 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 there's nobody. It's just, come on, it's like, really? Washing Machine Heart 2, which is again a similar type of song that lyrically just gets me a bit like, ugh, and her vocal performance here as well was slightly a bit over the top for me. It just sounded like a bit forced. And I'm not trying to say that, just because you're singing about something like that, it automatically sounds forced, because it doesn't. It doesn't always sound forced. But I just think in this particular situation, there are moments that sound very forced to me. Also, I'm not fully grasping the narrative of this album. A few tracks prior to these ones I'm mentioning, there's the track Me and My Husband, which alludes to the idea that she's never going to leave this person. This person is like everything to her, is emotionally supportive. And then, of course, we have these tracks that are focusing on how she's just got no one and nothing around her to help her through hard times. The only thing I can think of is that if that track is more written in the past tense and focusing on a time where she did have someone and that person's now gone, and of course she's writing these sadder songs, that could make sense. But then there's the track A Pearl, which sort of gives us the impression that she's been in this relationship in the past that was abusive, and now she can't quite handle the touch of another person, because on the chorus, she says, sorry, I can't touch you, and this person's growing tired of them. And that definitely makes more sense as to why she has this narrative on this album of, you know, not being able to you know, grow close to someone, or perhaps someone not quite understanding her as a person emotionally. But the issue is that these tracks are kind of scattered around. Like I said, with Me and My Husband being where it is doesn't quite match up with some of the lyrical ideas, which isn't such a bad thing at all. But what makes it worse for me to connect to everything on this album and, you know, feel myself engrossed in the emotional potency is the fact that each track just is not long enough for me. So many of these tracks are like 2 minutes, some don't even hit 2 minutes, they kind of just fizzle out, they just sort of end. And not like any of these songs, you know, fizzle out in a really uninteresting way, they kind of just end. And it just feels a bit odd to me. I don't know, I just feel like so much more could have been packed in this album if each song had been stretched out for like at least another minute longer. And to me it feels very different to an album by an artist like Tony Molina, where the sole purpose is to keep everything so short because every album he makes is no more than 15 minutes, whereas this Mitski album feels like it's aiming for something a bit longer and yet falls completely short after most of the tracks that finish. It's just very underwritten to me. I feel like so much more could have been added, so many layers to the instrumentation at times, because again it ends up being like Puberty 2, where the music feels more like a vibe as opposed to something that you're supposed to sink yourself into. Just stretch out these tracks, give them more room to breathe, give them more momentum. Don't just end them off at 2 minutes 15 seconds because it just feels kind of unfinished, to be honest. Geyser is perhaps the only example of where the shortness works really well, because I feel like this track has so much to it. It's very gorgeous and also quite ominous the way it opens up, and the vocals sound great here as well. You're my number one. It certainly feels like a lot more effort was put into the structure of this song than most of this album, to be honest. And like I said with the second track too, and tracks like Nobody, they have tunes to them that you can definitely bop along to keep yourself going throughout the album, but they don't come out often, you know? It's very much just simple, basic song structures that most of the album has, whereas it proves that she has the knack for a good tune but just doesn't do it often enough. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like that. I think I've talked for a while now about how I'm not really feeling this album, but overall I still think it sounds good, and Mitski as a vocalist is really good as well. Lyrically at times it can be okay, but you know, drops in quality quite significantly for me on some of these tracks. So yeah, I can see it being an album of the year for many people, or an album of the year contender, and that's cool, but just not something I'm going to return to. However, I will give it a 6 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts on this album, let me know your thoughts on what I said about this album as well. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. You're my number one. Yeah, have a good day.